Sophia's weathered hands trembled as she gripped the phone receiver, her knuckles white against the black plastic. The detective's voice crackled through the line like static from a distant storm, each word striking her chest with the force of a physical blow. Your granddaughter has been arrested for theft. Diamond bracelet high-end jewelry store on Fifth Avenue. The words hung in the air of her cramped Chicago apartment, settling over the faded photographs on the mantel. Images of birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, when hope still lived in this family. Through the kitchen window, she could see the Willis Tower piercing the grey November sky, its lights beginning to flicker on as darkness crept across the city. Her granddaughter Lucy, barely 17, with eyes that sparkled with dreams, bigger than their South Side neighborhood was somewhere, in a concrete cell probably crying into her hands. Sophia's son David arrived within the hour, his expensive suit wrinkled from the hasty drive from his Lincoln Park office. His wife Sharon followed, her designer heels clicking against the worn linoleum floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. They sat across from Sophia at the kitchen table she'd inherited from her mother, the same table where she'd fed David as a boy, where she'd helped him with homework, where she'd celebrated his law school acceptance. Now he looked at her with the cold detachment of a stranger. She probably did it, Mum. These kids today, you don't know them like you think you do. His words sliced through her heart like a blade, precise and merciless. Sophia felt something. Fundamental break inside her, a thread that had held her together through decades of struggle, finally snapping under the weight of betrayal. The next morning brought a cascade of humiliations. The local news picked up the story, teenager arrested in magnificent mile jewelry theft, and Sophia's phone rang incessantly with whispered gossip from neighbors. At the grocery store, Mrs. Patterson from down the hall averted her eyes. At the pharmacy. The cashier's smile turned strained and artificial. Lucy's school called to inform them she was suspended pending the outcome of the case. Through it all, David and Sharon retreated further into their own world of denial and embarrassment. "We can't be associated with this," Sharon declared, adjusting her diamond earrings with unconscious irony. "What will people think?" Sophia wanted to scream that she didn't care what people thought, that the only thing that mattered was Lucy's innocence, but her voice had become a whisper, her confidence eroded by the weight of isolation. The visits to the juvenile detention center were Sophia's only solace. Lucy sat across from her in the sterile visiting room, her school uniform, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that made her look impossibly young. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her usually perfect ponytail hung limp and unkempt. "I found it on the floor, Grandma," she repeated, her voice barely audible above the humming fluorescent lights. "I picked it up and took it to the security desk. I was trying to do the right thing." Sophia reached across the table and took her granddaughter's hands, feeling how cold they were, how small they seemed. "I believe you, mija," she whispered, using the Spanish endearment that always made Lucy smile. But Lucy's smile was gone, replaced by a hollow expression that spoke of dreams deferred and trust shattered. The guards announced the end of visiting hours, and Sophia watched her granddaughter shuffle away, her shoulders hunched in defeat. But what would happen when the truth finally emerged? Would it be too late to save not just Lucy's freedom, but her spirit? Sophia's arthritis flared as she climbed the courthouse steps, each movement sending jolts of pain through her swollen joints. She'd asked David for a ride that morning, standing in his marble foyer like a supplicant, but he'd laughed, actually laughed at her request. "Do you really want people to see you there at your age? What if the press takes pictures?" The cruelty of it took her breath away. So she'd taken 3 buses, her cane clicking against the floor with each step, her worn purse clutched tightly against her chest. The courthouse loomed before her like a monument to indifference, its grey stone facade reflecting the overcast sky. Inside, the corridors buzzed with lawyers in expensive suits and families torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Sophia found a metal bench outside the courtroom and settled in to wait, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She would not abandon Lucy, not when everyone else had already walked away. The courtroom was packed when the trial began, but Sophia wasn't allowed inside. The bailiff claimed it was too crowded, too intense for someone her age. She pressed her ear to the door, catching fragments of testimony that made her blood run cold. The prosecutor painted Lucy as an opportunistic teenager from a poor neighborhood who saw a chance to steal something beautiful. The defense attorney, an overworked public defender who barely knew Lucy's name, offered only weak protestations. Through the glass panel in the door, Sophia could see Lucy sitting at the defendant's table, her small frame dwarfed by the proceedings around her. The accuser, a wealthy woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a designer suit, pointed an accusing finger with the confidence of someone who had never been doubted. Sophia's heart broke, watching her granddaughter face this ordeal alone, surrounded by strangers who had already decided her guilt. But sometimes she thought, watching the homeless man shuffle past the courthouse steps, justice comes from the most unexpected places. The courtroom door burst open with such force that several people jumped in their seats. A man stood in the doorway, barefoot, disheveled, with the unmistakable smell of life lived on the streets clinging to him like a second skin. His hair was matted, his clothes torn and stained, but his eyes burned with a clarity that silenced the room. The judge looked annoyed, the lawyers confused, but Sophia felt something shift in the air, the electric charge that made her sit up straighter on her bench outside. "I saw it," the man said, his voice carrying the authority of truth. "She didn't steal. Nothing. I was behind the building. I sleep there sometimes." People in the gallery began to murmur, some moving away from him, others craning their necks to get a better look. Sophia pressed closer to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. After weeks of watching her granddaughter sink deeper into despair, could this stranger be the miracle she'd been praying for? The homeless man, who introduced himself as Robert, took the witness stand with a dignity that transcended his circumstances. His testimony was clear and unwavering. He had seen a man in an expensive suit drop the bracelet while fleeing the scene, and later watched Lucy pick it up and immediately take it inside to the security desk. "She gave me food once," he said, looking directly at Lucy. "Half her sandwich. That's how I remember her. She didn't steal. She gives." The courtroom fell silent, and Sophia watched through the glass as Lucy's face crumpled with emotion. The prosecutor tried to discredit Robert's testimony, questioning his mental state and his motives, but the man's account was too detailed, too consistent to dismiss. Sophia felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her granddaughter's posture straighten, hope returning to her eyes for the first time in weeks. The real thief was identified within days, a kleptomaniac from a wealthy family who had been caught on security cameras in other stores. The exoneration should have been a moment of triumph, but instead it felt hollow. Lucy emerged from the courthouse pale and shaken, her shoulders still hunched from weeks of carrying shame that was never hers to bear. Sophia wrapped her arms around her granddaughter, feeling how thin she'd become, how fragile. David and Sharon were nowhere to be found. They'd claimed the trial was too much drama and had distanced themselves from the entire situation. The press, which had been so eager to report Lucy's arrest, gave her vindication only a small paragraph buried in the back pages. Sophia helped Lucy into a taxi, her heart breaking at the sight of her granddaughter's hollow eyes. "It wasn't the accusation that hurt most, Grandma," Lucy whispered as they drove through the city. "It was looking around that courtroom and not seeing a single face that loved me." Sophia held her tighter, knowing that healing would take much longer than justice had. In the weeks that followed, Sophia watched Lucy struggle to rebuild her confidence. The girl who had once walked with her head high now looked at the ground, flinching when strangers stared too long. She'd lost weight, developed a nervous habit of checking locks multiple times, and had nightmares about being trapped in small spaces. Sophia tried to coax her out of her shell with favorite meals and gentle conversations, but Lucy remained withdrawn, haunted by the betrayal of her own family. At school, some students whispered behind her back, and teachers looked at her with a mixture of pity and discomfort. The scholarship opportunities Lucy had been pursuing before her arrest seemed to have evaporated, as if her temporary status as a defendant had permanently stained her record. Sophia felt helpless watching her granddaughter fade away, wondering if the damage done to Lucy's spirit would ever truly heal. Had they fought so hard for her freedom, only to lose her soul in the process? Sophia's transformation began with a phone call that changed everything. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Northwestern University had seen the news coverage of Lucy's case and was calling to offer her a full scholarship to study social work. "We need advocates who understand injustice firsthand," she explained to a stunned Sophia. "Young women who won't let the system fail others the way it almost failed them." When Sophia told Lucy about the offer, she saw something flicker in her granddaughter's eyes. Not quite hope yet, but curiosity. Over the following weeks, Lucy began to emerge from her shell, asking questions about the program, researching cases of wrongful accusations, and slowly rebuilding her sense of purpose. Sophia watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and relief, seeing glimpses of the fierce, compassionate girl she'd raised. Lucy started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping other families navigate the justice system, and Sophia noticed how her granddaughter's confidence grew with each person she helped. The nightmare was becoming a mission, and Sophia felt her own strength returning as she watched Lucy find her voice again. The confrontation with David and Sharon came on a cold January evening when they arrived at Sophia's apartment, expecting to find a family ready to move on and forget. Instead, they found a grandmother who had rediscovered her strength and a granddaughter who had found her purpose. "We think it's time to put all this behind us," Sharon announced, settling into Sophia's worn armchair as if she owned it. "Lucy can come to dinner again and we can pretend none of this ever happened." Sophia felt the old anger rise in her chest, but this time it was clean and righteous. "No," she said simply, "we will not pretend, we will not forget, and we will not accept your conditional love." David started to protest, but Lucy stood up, her voice steady and clear. "I don't need your approval anymore," she told them. "I have something better. I have a purpose." Sophia watched her son's face register shock and then hurt, but she felt no satisfaction in his pain, only a deep sadness for all the years she'd enabled his selfishness. This was the moment when their small family truly became whole. The day Lucy graduated from high school, Sophia sat in the front row of the auditorium, her heart swelling with pride as her granddaughter walked across the stage. The applause was thunderous, and Sophia noticed that many of the families Lucy had helped at the legal aid clinic were there cheering for the girl who had become their advocate. Robert, the homeless man who had saved Lucy's life with his testimony, sat beside Sophia clean-shaven and wearing a suit provided by the same social services organization where Lucy now volunteered. He'd been off the streets for 3 months working with a job placement program and living in transitional housing. "She saved me too," he told Sophia, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Giving someone hope when they've lost everything. That's a gift not many people have." Sophia squeezed his hand, understanding that healing had come full circle. The girl who had been falsely accused had become the woman who would ensure others received the justice she'd nearly been denied. As summer ended and Lucy prepared to leave for Northwestern, Sophia found herself looking forward to the future for the first time in years. Lucy had grown into a confident young woman with a fierce sense of justice and an unshakable belief in the power of truth. She spoke at community meetings about reforming the juvenile justice system, wrote articles for the local newspaper about the importance of believing in young people, and had become a role model for other teenagers facing adversity. Sophia watched, her granddaughter pack her belongings, marveling at how someone so young could carry such wisdom. "I'm going to miss you, Grandma," Lucy said, folding her court documents into a folder labeled My Story. "But I'm going to make sure no other grandmother has to sit on that cold bench outside a courtroom watching their grandchild fight alone." Sophia smiled, knowing that Lucy would keep that promise. On the morning Lucy left for college, Sophia stood on her apartment balcony, watching the yellow taxi disappear into Chicago's morning traffic. The city looked different now, not smaller but more manageable, as if the impossible had been proven possible. She thought about Robert, who had chosen to speak truth when silence would have been easier. She thought about Dr. Rodriguez, who had seen potential where others saw only problems. She thought about Lucy, who had transformed her pain into purpose. And she thought about herself, an old woman who had found her voice again when it mattered most. The morning sun cast long shadows across the south side, and Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. The girl they had called a thief was becoming a protector, and sometimes Sophia reflected the greatest victories come from the most unexpected places. When the world is silent, it only takes one voice to begin justice, and Sophia knew that Lucy's voice would echo through the halls of courtrooms and the hearts of the forgotten for years to come. Congratulations, Type 9, in the comments, so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.